Okay, good morning, students. Welcome back. Let us continue with our discussion on the poem The Tiger and hopefully finish our discussion on Blake and his work. But that does not mean that your engagement with Blake is over. Read further. There's plenty of reference material available on Blake and the Romantic movement in general, specifically these two, the collections, the Songs of Innocence and Experience. You can locate some good reference material, and those who do the assignment and seminar can go a bit deeper and get the material that can be shared with the rest of the class. Okay, so allow me to get the lines of the poem ready so that we can use that for the lecture. We talked about the lamb, the animal that the child or the innocent speaker chooses to think about the creator. You know, it's when the child sees the lamb that the child is reminded of, you know, the one who has brought so much of beauty to the world through every created thing. Through the little lamb, he has brought softness and a lot of delight. You know, that is what is heard ringing all over the meadow. There is so much of beauty that is spread to the world by the God, by the Creator's generous act of creation. But the shift entirely, but the scene entirely shifts when you come to the tiger at every level. You know, the sight, the sound, the feel, everything is different here. The sight is different. From the sunny meadow, you are now transported to the dark forest. From the soft woolly clothing of the lamb, you know, that touch, you now come to a being that is so hot to handle, you can't even touch it. And the speaker here wonders how dreadful must have been the hand, how awe-inspiring, how dread-inspiring must have been the hands that held the tiger in place when it was being created. So the act of creation becomes a daring act here, whereas in the earlier instance, it was an act of love, an act of sharing and caring. So that's about the sight and the touch, then the sounds, you know, the way the lines affect you. We observed the very pleasant tone, the gentle rhythm, and the sweet sounding alliterative lines of the lamb. But here we come to lines that evoke a sense of fear, trepidation, mystery, suspense, and there is generally that tone of panic that you hear in the rhythm of the song. There's something that is not seen, and therefore that sense of danger lurking around every corner is heard in the very rhythm that this poem uses. So that's how the senses are different, or the sensations are different in both the poems. We were talking about the creator, who the speaker concludes from the very beginning has to be a very different being, because what he encounters in the tiger is a sense of, when he looks at the tiger, is a sense of remoteness. There is no kinship that he feels as the child had felt with the lamb. The lamb ended on a note of harmony, but here what you have is a note of dissonance. You know, that dissonance is further exemplified in every sight and sound that is used in the poem. So a sense of separation, a sense of remoteness, a sense of distance, a sense of a lack of harmony in general. It is a person who grows up and understands the world as one that is no longer a bed of roses. So tiger, tiger burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? We notice the oxymoron in fearful symmetry. You know, symmetry is one that is so out of the ordinary that he feels that it evokes a sense of fear rather than an aesthetic delight or pleasure. And the speaker is absolutely certain that the components of the tiger must have been brought from different remote region, from distant, in what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes, and on what wings dare he aspire, what the hand, what the, what was that? There sees the fire. Yeah, how you know, the how terrifying. If the tiger itself is so terrifying and so awe-inspiring, how much more terrifying would have been the creator who created it. As I told you, the difference is not so much between the lamb and the tiger, but the difference is between the speaker's perception of the creator. What the child sees as the creator is vastly different from what the experienced person realizes when he thinks about the creator, the one who holds this universe intact. And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? The sinews are the muscles of the heart. You know, when your muscles were, that sense of manufacturing, of creation is again highlighted here. Whereas in the other one, it was giving, you know, an act of charity, an act of love. It's almost as if it comes from the creator's own being. But here, it is a different thing that is being created. You know, the distance that man must have felt when he moved from an agrarian pastoral background to a feudal and mechanical and industrial one is again one that you can encounter as a contrast between these two sets of homes. When you move to the industrial age, you know, the distance between the person who makes and the person who works, or the distance between the person and his work, the worker and his work, it widens. In the pastoral age, you create that which you need the most. What is that? Your food. You grow your food, and the relationship between the maker and the made is one there. You create your food. Whereas when you move to the industrial age, you don't create your food. You create the things which have to be sold in a capitalist system in order to fetch you the food. You create things with iron, with metals, with stone and things which have to, and things like that. These have to be sold in order to fetch your food. So the distance between what matters most to you and yourself widens, right? So this reaches a peak with the 20th century. We realize how man feels that sense of alienation and a kind of absurdity in the world all around when this distance becomes wider and wider, and the relationship between the creator and the created thing becomes a very mechanical, robotic one. Okay, so on what shoulder and what art? Again, you know, the fact that the creation of the tiger must have been one that involved a great deal of labor and also a great deal of artistry. The shoulder they're standing for, the physical and the manual labor, the great strength, the superhuman strength that would have gone into it. And what art could twist the sinews of your heart with such perfection. And then when your heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet. You know, when the tiger was finally given life, when the creator breathed life into it, how strong must have been the hands that held it there and the feet on which the creator stood there, you know, without running away, because the tiger has been created and it's a ferocious animal. It can pounce on the creator, but how strong, how much more powerful than the tiger would have been the creator to stand there on his 2 feet as the tiger was created. And then you now come to the place of the creation, the tiger's creation. Whereas the place was immaterial in the earlier collection. The lamb was just born as a manifestation of the creator. Whereas here it is in a place. From that pastoral land you move to the workshop. It is the smithy of a blacksmith that you find here, where you have all these mechanical instruments that aid the process of creation. The hammer, the chains, the anvil. The anvil is the block, sometimes made of wood, sometimes made of metal, and sometimes made of stone, on which the heated metal is kept. It is the heated metal, it's red hot, it can't be held with your hands, and therefore it is suspended on a chain. It is kept on the anvil, and then the hammer beats it into the desired shape. So the force, the aggression, the heat, the chains, all of these now come in. These are all the images that you associate with the new mechanical age. It is an age of a kind of control coming in. That is what is conveyed by the chains. There were no chains. There was no anvil there. There was no beating. There was no force that we encountered in the Songs of Innocence. Here you have restriction, you have authority, you have force, you have control, you have regimentation. All of these, these are things that the experienced speaker becomes aware of. So what the hammer, what the chain, you will notice how the lines are not even uttered fully. It's like the lines uttered by a person who's on the run, who would not be able to complete sentences in all their perfection. You just have words now panted out. What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? The brain of the tiger being heated in the furnace. How huge and how terrifying must have been the furnace and the fire with which your body was smelted into shape. What the anvil, what dread grasp dare thy deadly terrors clasp? The anvil and the thing, the hooks that held the heated metal in shape. It would be suspended on a long chain, and then there would be these hooks that would hold it in place so that it can be beaten into the desired shape. I don't think I need to convey to you further about the symbolism of the hooks, the chain, the anvil, the hammer, and all the beating and all the heat and all that. Yeah, so that is the process of creation, the smithy being the site where the creation takes place. And then you come to the next stanza, the last but one stanza, which has always mystified the critics and the readers. Nobody has actually been able to comprehend it perfectly enough, what the speaker conveys when he gives us this image of the stars throwing down their spears. What does it refer to? Does it refer to an early morning scene, after the night, the stars throwing down their beams of light? Was it at that point of time that the tiger was created? It could be a reference to that early morning scene. On the other hand, it could also be a reference to, the biblical story of the angels rebelling against God's authority. And then when God did not forgive them, the angels finally pleading for mercy when God banished them from heaven. It could be a reference to that Old Testament story of the banishment of the angels from God's heaven. You have Lucifer, the brightest of God's angels, as described in works like the Paradise Lost, like Milton's Paradise Lost, for example. Lucifer was the brightest angel, but there came a time when Lucifer got together a group of angels who decided to rebel against God's supreme authority, and they believed that they needed the kind of position that God had, and therefore they rose in rebellion against God. But when that happened, there was no mercy on the part of God. God realized that, this is how the Old Testament tells you, the rebels had to be banished from heaven and they were punished. We saw how they were made to be reborn as serpents that could only go basely upon their belly, serpents that can never stand up erect. It was after this that you have the creation of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and all that, the act of creation. So it was an act of what shall you say, a ruthless act on the part of God to banish these rebelling angels from heaven. And when they realized that their punishment could not be revoked and that they would really have to go away from paradise or from heaven, you have the angels seeking God's mercy. They throw down their spears in the sense of they lay down their weapons and seek forgiveness. But God stood his ground because God realized that if any kind of mercy was shown at that point of time, in no time at all, these angels would retread the same steps and go back to their rebellious ways. So God had to take a fine decision in a very merciless, ruthless, and even a rather, you may call it a kind of cruel manner, in an unmoved and impersonal manner. That seems to fit in with the image of the God here who seems to smile when he sees his work. It's rather incredulous. It's rather unbelievable for the speaker here that it is the same God that I knew as a child. Did he who made the lamb make thee? Is it the same God? It's so difficult for the speaker here to comprehend the fact that life has these two extremes, that gentle, loving, peaceful side which he knew as a child, and this ruthless, unpredictable, dangerous, and mysterious side that he now sees as an adult. And he realizes, he comes to the realization that to hold this kind of unpredictable and dangerous and evil place in place, you need to have a God who's not just meek and mild, but who can also be stern, who can also be ruthless, and who is powerful enough to resist any kind of resistance on the part of his followers. So that experience of life is what the speaker conveys here. To hold this kind of a world of ambiguity and conflicts and mystery and danger in place, you cannot continue to hold on to the image of a very gentle and meek God. It is that a change that is conveyed by this poem. So when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears in crying for mercy. On the other hand, when you're thinking of an early morning scene, it could be probably a reference to the drops of dew that you can encounter in the early morning. At that time, did he smile his work to see? Was God happy with this creation, with the creation of the heaven and the act of creation? With that you encounter a whole new dimension of God, and it is unbelievable for the speaker. Did he who made the lamb make thee? That is the crux of the poem. Is it the same God? And therefore, with the question remaining unanswered, you will notice how the whole poem is in the form of a series of questions, typically conveying the conflict-ridden world of the adults. You have questions, you face conflicts, and it's not always that you get answers for all the problems. Life is one unending saga of problems, conflicts, ambiguities, confusions, uncertainties, and so on. It is totally different from the the pristine world of childhood where conflicts do not last for long. Every question has an answer in the world outside. But here you can only repeat the questions. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? The only change is in the word dare. The verb becomes a stronger verb now. From could, you move to dare. That is, the more you ponder over the image of the Creator, the more you meditate over the world and its dangers and ambiguities, the more you realize that how terrifying the whole thing is, and how terrifying, how powerful must be that force which holds this world in place. It is that mature realization that is conveyed through this poem, which begins and ends with this question. Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in what immortal hand, in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? So that is the poem. I now leave these two poems for your own reading and for your own analysis. Please do discover the beauty of the lines on your own. Read up more about Blake. You have plenty of material available on Blake online, and most of these, and you can look at the plates, the illustrations. You have some in the library too. If at all you do come to the library, you may do some reference on your own here. We have plenty of material on Blake, on the Romantic poets in general, on Blake. I would specifically direct your attention to William Blake, the poems, a book edited by Nicholas Marsh. Nicholas Marsh. Nicholasmarsh, William Blake, the poems. That can be found in the Blake section. The number that you will have to look for would be OE3 BLA. I guess it is 9 or so, the number of the book. The author is Nicholas Marsh. I had actually taken it from the library in order to show it to you, but I think I probably left it in the department. So you will have no difficulty in locating that book. It gives you a very good introduction to Blake, to the poems in the two collections, and also many of these poems are analyzed in great detail. So you can refer to this book. William Blake, the poems, written by Nicholas Marsh. It would be especially useful for you if you had to do your assignment or present your seminar on Blake. Right, I guess I will wind up the recording, and I don't go from the meet. I'll just remain there also. I'll just wind up the recording now.